Welcome to Home Group. My name is Rick Renner, and here I am with Denise, Joel, and Maxim. Hey, guys.
Good to
Welcome
be
to Home
with you.
Group.
It's good to be with you, home group. We're glad to be with you. And before we get any further, I want to ask to please like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. We really want more people to see these home groups because we're studying the Bible. We're studying the truth. And that is very important.
And we want you to write your comments because I read every single comment. Denise, welcome to Home Group.
Thank you, Rick. And I want to say thank you for being with us. And partners, thank you so much for partnering with us and giving to this ministry and praying for us. Because look at this beautiful studio that we're in. That's because of you. Thank you so much.
Maxim, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm very thankful to be here.
Well, today we're going to continue talking about what's in my new book, which is called Fallen Angels, Giants, Monsters, and the World Before the Flood. And you can order your copy by going to renner.org. If you'll just go there, you'll see all the information that you need to see. My friends, this is the funnest book I have ever written in my life. Now, I have written more than 40 books, but I wrote this book really fast, had the help of a lot of people who contributed and edited. And in this book, there are more than 300 pieces of art, graphics, and illustrations, and it is amazing. It is amazing. In fact, somebody who has been studying the Ark for years and years and years just wrote to me and said, because they've reviewed the book, they said, we have never seen all of this information in one book. We've studied it here and there, and we've had to really search for it all, but to see it all in one book, they have never seen it. And I want you to have this. And I believe it's really important that we understand what was happening in the world before the days of the flood, because Jesus said in Matthew 24:37, it's going to be replicated in the earth just before the second coming. That's why we need to understand what was happening in the world before the flood. And my friends, this will open a whole realm of information to you that you may not have ever considered before. And it might even challenge you. It challenged me, but it really explained a lot of things to me, and I believe that it will to you as well. But Joel and I and Maxim and our whole team, we went to the eastern part of Turkey, to the lower mountains of Ararat, to see the ruins of the Ark. You know, it's funny because Denise and I were traveling in the United States, and I kept telling people, hey, I went to the Ark. And people said, oh, I've never been to Kentucky. I'd like to go see that big Ark in Kentucky. Of course, the Ark Encounter, it's a wonderful thing to see. My friends, I'm not talking about the replica in Kentucky. We went to see the real ruins of Noah's Ark. Now, how were they discovered? Well, in the 1940s, there was a massive earthquake. And when that earthquake took place, a shape appeared in the mountains. And the local Kurdish village, who are called the Cordadians by the ancient writers, and they wrote about that same village thousands of years ago. They've been there for thousands of years. And those people who were living there suddenly saw this huge shape appear. But nobody paid attention to them and what they had to say because they were Kurds living in the mountains of Ararat. But then there was another earthquake, and the earthquake was so severe that they decided they needed to fly over the region, and they needed to take aerial photographs to see how the landscape had changed due to this earthquake. And when they were looking at the photographs, one captain, whose name was Durupanar, saw this image. He said, what? What is that? He said, that is a ship. What is a ship doing in the mountains of Ararat? It was right there on the film. So they sent it to Dr. Brandenberger at Ohio State University. Dr. Brandenberger is the expert who was able, with satellite imagery, to identify the location of the Cuban missile bases in the 1960s. So this was the man top in his field, and he said, I have no doubt that is a ship in the mountains of Ararat. Now, people had been looking for Noah's Ark on the peak of Mount Ararat. Can't be there. That's a stratovolcano. First of all, because it's a stratovolcano, it means it's much, much bigger than it was at the time of the flood. It also means there's been multiple eruptions. It is thousands of feet of lava. And if the ark had landed on Mount Ararat, it would be at the base of the mountain under thousands of feet of lava or it would just be blown to bits. And even today, you guys have been there with me. I mean, the lava fields are immense.
They are. Nothing grows on them.
Nothing grows on
They're
them.
huge.
And they go all the way out into the floodplain. I mean, they are just immense. Nothing could have survived that. But the Bible does not say the ark landed on Mount Ararat. It says it landed in the mountains of Ararat. Well, in one of the lower mountains of Ararat, a mountain called Mount Judy, is this massive ship-shaped formation. Now, where it is today is not where it landed. It landed about 1,400 feet higher up the side of the slope, right on the very edge of what today is the Iranian border. And that name, Mount Judy, where it today rests, is called the place of the landing. And if you go to the top of that mountain, and you can never go there, I understand that it's too hard to get there.
There's a military outpost right there. And they were watching us as we were filming.
An Iranian outpost, yeah. They're right there. It's right on the edge of Iran. So I wrote this book because I know you'll probably never get to go there. But when you go to the top of that mountain, today it looks like a beautiful field. It's filled with flowers on the top of the mountain. But there's a massive indentation. That's where the ark landed. But because it is a mud flow, over 4,000 years, it's moved from there down the side of the mountain and stopped in one place. And the reason it stopped is because a big stone rolled into the ark. And that stone today is still in the middle of the ark. And it's held the ark in place so that it stopped moving. Now, everything around it moves every year.
And you can, when you're up there on that place of the landing,
Yeah,
you can look down in this valley and you can see it's just a massive floodplain.
it is.
The whole area below you is just this place where water just flowed through and went places. But then off the distance, you can see what is today Mountain Ararat and smaller Ararat. I didn't even know there was a smaller Ararat, but it's amazing.
Now, a lot of skeptics said, no, this formation, it's just a natural formation. Well, you can tell by looking at it, it is not a natural formation. But because of all the underground penetrating radar and the ERT scans they've done, you can now see what's under the ground. It is not a natural formation. And the big rock that's in the middle of the ark is not connected to anything underground. It literally rolled into the ark. It's sitting right inside the ark. And you can see the hull of the ark. When you see it from underneath, from these scans, it removes all doubt. You are looking at a ship.
And this is no small ship. This was the largest ship built before the Titanic.
And all those images are in this book. I mean, when you see it, you will be stunned. But that big rock held the ark right there in that place for all of these years.
And you know what else is amazing to me? Just off the distance a little bit in the floodplain, they have found what's called Drogue stones, which are ancient anchors.
No, they're not anchors.
Oh, what are they?
They look like anchors, but they're not anchors. Maxim, what are they?
They would help to balance the ship.
On stormy waters.
Wow.
And they have found 26 of them. That doesn't mean that's all that there were. That's just all that they found. And guys, they are so big. Most of them, half of them are buried under the earth. Well, if you look at the part that's above and you consider the other half is under the earth, they're about as big as a car. I mean, they are massive. And there's a hole cut through the top. That's where the rope would go through. And they would dangle them from the sides of the ark, and all of that is also in this book. Can you tell I want you to have this book? You're going to love this book. And those stones would literally balance the ship in bad weather. And Drogue stones were used in all ancient ships. You can find them along the Nile. You can find Drogue stones at the Mediterranean. It was very common in all ancient ships. And what's really amazing is if you follow the trail of those Drogue stones, you can see that when the water begin to calm down and things begin to be more smooth, Noah and his sons begin to cut those stones. And if you follow the path of those stones, you can see how the ark sailed through that area and finally turned and came up and landed with the very bow of the ship upward in the lower mountains of Ararat, and it came to rest on what today is called Mount Judy.
And when you look at the Drogue stones, it almost looked like Noah said, "Okay, boys, cut them." And they just, I mean, because there's a lot of them all in one area, and these are immovable objects. I mean, they are huge.
Are you talking about the village of 9 people in this book?
Village of 8.
8, yes, thank you.
Yeah, most of the Drogue stones are in an ancient village, which is referred to as the village of eight.
8.
Gee, I wonder where they would get a title like that. Noah and his family were
8.
eight. It's the village of eight. That's the ancient name of that village. And not only that, just a little bit beyond the village of eight, what else is there,
The
Maxim?
house where they lived.
There's the ruins of a Byzantine church that's probably about 1,500 or 1,600 years old, just the ruins of the church. Why did they build a church in the middle of a valley in the middle of nowhere? Because the ancients said that was the location of Noah's house in the valley. And so they constructed this church on the site of Noah's house to commemorate the location of where Noah and his family lived in the valley. Now, somebody might say, no, he didn't live in a house. The Bible says he lived in a tent in Genesis chapter 9. Well, hey, Noah lived for 300 years after the flood, actually 350. Do you think he lived in a tent for 350 years? When the Bible says his tent, it means his place of residence. He had a house, and he lived in the valley just below where the ark landed, on the place of the landing. I think it's just amazing.
What's also amazing, when you're there, you can understand why God told him to stay in the ark extra time. I think he told him to stay there another year.
He was not allowed to leave the ark until God said, now you can leave.
It's because all the water was draining. I mean, if they had walked out, they would have just walked out into this huge flood mud flow. It would have been...
Well, actually, the Bible says that he exited the ark when the earth was dry. But you know, when you get there, I guess there's measures of dryness. It was a floodplain. Ay, 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 the mud. It is still mud. Of course, it was dry compared to a worldwide flood. But today we're going to go back to our Bibles. Are you ready?
Another thing that, before we go on, just shocks me is I don't know where Noah was from.
Well, actually, nobody does.
But where he moved to was probably a lot different than where he was from. And because when you're there and you see it, I mean, I don't know where he was from, but it had to be a lot different than where he was from.
Well, Noah was from a prophetic family. Let's kind of go through it. Let's go to Genesis chapter 6, and let's look at verse 1. And it came to pass, when men did begin to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Well, let's pause there just for a moment. When did this great multiplication begin to take place? It began much earlier than Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. Genesis 6, verse 1 is kind of a summation that tells us what was happening up until that time. And we know that when God spoke to Adam and Eve, he told them to be fruitful and to multiply and to fill the earth. He released a blessing which caused them to supernaturally multiply. And they lived very, 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 very long lives. Very long lives. Well, when you live 900 years, you have the supernatural ability to produce a lot of children. But then when you look at all the descendants of Adam, for example, let's just talk about a few. The Bible tells us about Jared. Jared was very important in the story of Noah because it was during the days of Jared that these angels began to come down and have sex with women. And that's why his name was so important. His name literally means shall come down. His name was given by his parents to denote what was happening during the time of his birth. These angels were beginning to come down in large numbers to have sexual relations with women who were giving birth to giants. That started during the days of Jared, but Jared had kids. One of his kids was Enoch. And Enoch was the first prophet in the Old Testament. And in fact, Enoch was so accurate in his prophecies that he saw the second coming of Jesus.
Wow.
And Jude refers to it in the book of Jude. Enoch said, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s and 10,000s of his saints, which means at the beginning of time, Enoch was so accurate, he saw the very end of time. And he was also prophetic. He had a son whose name was Methuselah. And Methuselah lived longer than any man who's ever lived on earth. And Methuselah's name means, when he dies, it will come. Which means by the time of Methuselah's birth, God was already saying, because of all this evil activity and all these giants in the earth, a judgment is coming. And when Methuselah was born, Enoch named him prophetically to say, when this boy dies, that will trigger the moment that a judgment is coming. Methuselah had a son whose name was Lamech. The word Lamech means lamentation. His name was given to him prophetically to denote that at the time of Lamech's birth, misery was in the earth because of all this evil activity of giants and angels that were sinning. It was at a peak. And Lamech had a son whose name was Noah. And the name Noah means a pause or a rest. And Lamech prophesied that during the life of Noah, there finally would come a pause, or there would come rest from all this evil, nefarious activity that just seemed to be filling the entire earth. Now, that's amazing. But you know what I get from this? God was speaking to that family. And they passed their revelation and their understanding from one generation to another generation to another generation to another generation. Well, when you read Hebrews 11, verse 7, it says Noah being warned of God. So you kind of think that Noah just heard from God by himself for the first time. But actually, it was much bigger than that. He had a family that had been hearing from God. And one family passed their revelation to the next, to the next, to the next generation. And when Noah was born and was being raised, he understood that during his life, because of what God had said to his forefathers during his life, there would come a reprieve from all this horrible activity. And Denise, it makes me think of the importance of us treasuring the revelation that we've been given and not forgetting it, but make sure we give it to our kids, make sure we give it to our grandkids. We can help prepare our kids and our grandkids by passing along to them what God has said to us. Noah was prepared by his forefathers, and then when God spoke to Noah, it made it easier for him to hear because he'd already been trained by his forefathers about what was coming. Denise?
That's why it's so important for us to appreciate what God has done in our lives and not to be ashamed of it, but to give it freely to our children and to our grandchildren. Because I mean, you can see, as Rick has said, it was passed down, passed down, passed down, passed down. And God has a purpose for families to give out information that is so important. The revelation that God is giving you is not just for you. It's for your children and your grandchildren. And don't hide it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be timid about it, but give what you have, because God didn't just give it to you for you to keep. He gave it to you for you to give.
Now, let's go back to Genesis chapter 6 and verse 1 before we finish this home group. It says, and it came to pass. Now, this is a summation of what was happening in the world up until this time. When men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Well, how many people do you think were on the earth by the time of the flood?
I want to give a guess.
Give a guess.
I'm going to say 2,364,123
Oh, Joel, cut it out. That's
people.
too specific. Let's say there were at least a couple million.
I was close. I said 2
You were.
million.
And there may have been even more than that. But people lived such long lives before the flood that it is likely, are you ready for this? It's likely that Lamech, who was Noah's father, lived about 56 years concurrent with Adam.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Is that amazing? Which means these family members were able to talk to Adam and interview him about what life was like in the Garden of Eden before the flood. I mean, the interaction was just amazing. But yet, by the time that you come to Genesis chapter 6, verses 1, verses 2, verses 4 and 3, you find this horrible, horrible thing was happening, which started during the days of Jared. And again, his name means shall come down. That's when these angels abandon their posts and they begin to descend into the atmosphere of the earth. And this is what today people call aliens. There's a famous TV program where people have ancient alien conspiracies. It's a bunch of nonsense. The Bible makes it very clear. It wasn't aliens, it was angels. The Bible tells us. And they came into the earth and they interacted with women who then gave birth to giants. My friends, you don't need to believe conspiracy theories about this because it's all written in the Bible. But we're out of time. This has been good, but we're going to continue this in the next home group. Bye-bye.
Please like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends so more people can see it.